During this section in our Power Civil Site Modeler for Commercial Design course, we're going to be taking a look at creating a modeler project. And our training guide will be on page 1-2. We're going to talk about the project and its preferences and how to set those up and carry those on from project to project. The Site Modeler project file has an extension of GSF, or Geopack Site File. In that file contains many surfaces, or potentially can contain many surfaces. Those surfaces are referred to as models, objects, models or objects. So instead of one triangles file or tin file, we'll have many models and objects. I'm going to go ahead and open up our design file that we're working with, and that's located in Data Geosite Site Modeler Lab 1 Site Plan 2D.dgn. This will help us to see more about what a site modeler project is. What we're working here is we have a site plan. It's going to have a roadway, kind of a main road, and we're going to have an entrance road that comes up to our building, and next to that entrance road up by the building is a parking lot. We also have a pond in between the the parking lot and the main county road. So in Site Modeler, we have to set up a project. So a project, like I said, it's a file, kind of a database, that's going to contain models, objects, and elements. Those are the components of a project. So what is a model? I simply just like to term a model a logical group of site objects. And models have their own display. So in a model, for example, back in my DGN file, my model will be everything you see. It'll be the pond and the building and the parking lot and the roadways all merged together to form the overall grading surface or model. The objects I like to simply term a logical group of site elements. So for example, here in a schematic, I have a center line of a road, an edge of pavement on each side. Well, those three elements would form my object surface for my roadway. I would not put the building pad in my roadway object, because then what would happen is I would triangulate the surface and it would end up going from the edge of pavement straight over to the building pad. And that may not be what I want. So I try to keep the building pad separate. Another unique thing about objects is they have their own side slopes. Well, what are side slopes? Side slopes are simply how do we merge with the surface underneath or above the object that we're creating. So here I have my roadway. How do we merge, or how do we tie down to the ground? That would be the side slopes. And each object has its own. So the building could have flatter side slopes than the parking lot, than the roadway. And those are all controlled at the object level and recomputed as things move around and get new elevation. Another unique thing about objects is they have their own display. So therefore, I might be working in my project here, and maybe I've focused my attention on the parking lot in the middle of the site. In that area, I'd like to work in a parking lot object, and I'd like to see contours every foot. But maybe my overall model, or my overall rest of the site, I only need to see contours every 10 feet. So it gives me the ability to view the object surface that I'm working on with different symbology, different information might be shown than my overall model surface. It just gives me multiple display options. But just keep in mind that models have their own display. Display meaning contour display, triangle display, labeling display, and objects have their own display as well. Now the bulk of the work in Modeler is contained at the elements level, or the third component. The elements are 2D or 3D microstation elements. So in my design file, what we see in this design file are the basic graphics that we're going to use Modeler to create. So I don't have extra graphics in here really that I'm not going to assign elevation to. I don't have extra stuff in here that's not needed. I simply created a file and kind of laid out the basic geometry of where slope changes on my site. And for my case, slope changes at the center line of the road, the edges of pavement. It changes at the parking lot, edges of pavement, the building pad, and so forth. So I simply just introduce 2D or 3D microstation power civil elements into the file. So that's what a site element is. In the project file, it's a 2D or 3D microstation element that you have assigned elevation to. So you go through a set of tools to assign elevation to an element. You assign a DTM feature to that element. A DTM feature being a break line or contour or void or boundary feature. And then thirdly, you'll assign association to it. Association basically means that when you associate something like the edge of pavement elevation to the centerline elevation, so maybe you base the edge of pavement elevation on a 2% cross slope from the centerline, we can remember that inside the modeler. So inside that project file we store how that elevation was assigned. So, if you decide to grab something, grab the elements, for example, you grab the center line and you move it, the edges of pavement will go with it. They maintain their relationship. The same thing with the building pad. If you had associated the building pad to the ground surface underneath it, no matter where you move it within that ground surface, it'll maintain its relationship to the ground. So if I base my building pad on a certain height above ground, as I move that, it would change and maintain that height above ground. So in the project file, we have models, objects, and elements. And the majority of our time will be spent creating the elements, assigning them to objects, and then putting those objects in a model. And that's what the project is all about. So next we're going to create our project file within this DGN file.